Welcome to the Tourism Hub podcast, a podcast devoted to you and your excellence, providing inspiration and education for the entrepreneurs, experience makers and excellence seekers of our industry to take your tourism business and career to a whole new level. And I am your host, Despina Karatias.
Relax.
Welcome to this episode of Tourism Hub. I am in the winning headquarters of Visit Geelong and The Bellarine with a winning team, and I have a couple of team members that I'm going to share with you over the duration of the podcast, so look out for another episode. But today I am talking to Elizabeth Curtin, who has looked after, managed, nurtured, grown the Visitor Information Centres in this region. She is famous for Visitor Information Centre growth. She was there from the grassroots of actually bringing visitor information, the importance to them, not only in this region, but for the state of Victoria. And without further ado, I want to welcome the lovely Elizabeth Curtin. Thank you for agreeing to do this with me.
Thanks, Despina.
Elizabeth, tell us now, if we kind of look at your journey over I guess just here at Visit Geelong and The Bellarine, how long have you been with the team here? It's been...
Well, we started as Geelong Otway Tourism, and that was formed about 25 years ago, following the amalgamation of the councils across Victoria. There were 8 councils in Geelong, and it was then the city of Greater Geelong was formed into one council. At that time, Roger Grant was employed as the CEO to get things moving and shaking in the tourism industry from the Geelong side of Werribee to the other side of Apollo Bay. So at that time, we were called Geelong Otway Tourism, and I started a year after Roger to bring the Visitor Information Centres into some sort of organisation. At the time, there were centres in Geelong. There was one at the Market Square Shopping Centre, which was then owned by the former City of Geelong, and there was one at Corio, then owned by the Shire of Corio. So there were volunteers working in both of those. There was also a small band of volunteers working at the National Wool Museum at an information centre there. Prior to the amalgamation, I actually joined the team of volunteers that were at the Wool Museum. It was just a handful, and in those days you would be sent out a roster for 3 months and you filled in if you could do any day in that 3 months. You might do one, or you might do one a month. And another volunteer person put that together. So when I started, across those 3 centres, there were 33 volunteers, of which I still have the names and the rosters of those volunteers. Following on from that, as I said, Geelong Otway Tourism was formed. So I worked very closely with the team across that region. So our centres under our umbrella were Colac, Apollo Bay, Lorne, Torquay, Queenscliff and the Geelong centres. About 3 years ago, that all changed and Tourism Geelong and The Bellarine was formed, a separate tourism association from what we were then, the Great Ocean Road. We now have within the Geelong and Bellarine, under the banner of the City of Greater Geelong, we have 7 centres or outlets, and just now there's a whole new formation in regards to accreditation. So our hub, or our main centre now, will be based at the Wool Museum, which is the centre of town, and that is our busiest centre in Geelong. Then we had 2 other accredited centres. One is on the highway as you're coming on from Melbourne. That's the Gateway Centre to Geelong, the Great Ocean Road and the Bellarine, and that's located at a service station as you're coming from Melbourne at Little River. Not in the town of Little River, but on the highway. Then we have another accredited centre, which is on the Bellarine Highway, located at Flying Brick Cider House, and that is the gateway to the Bellarine. We then have booths which are open every day, and they include Avalon. I believe we're the only visitor information centre booth or outlet at an airport that is staffed solely by volunteers, and we are there to meet the planes that come in between the hours of 8:30 and 5 o'clock. As well as that, we have an information booth on the waterfront, which is Geelong's main tourist attraction. Everyone visits the waterfront now, and just recently, the waterfront booth, which is just a very small little booth, welcomes more international visitors than our Gateway Centre at Little River. Then we have another centre, which is at the Market Square Shopping Centre, which is right in a city again, walking distance to the booth, but a completely different clientele, and the clientele there is what we call our visiting friends and relatives booth. The majority of visitors that go there are not always visitors, but locals. They ask questions on the shopping centre, where's the toilets, where's the buses, but lots of interaction with visiting friends and relatives. We're having visitors for the weekend. What is there that we can see and do? As well as that, every summer from Boxing Day until the last weekend in January, we have our portable roving caravan that we place in Barwon Heads, which is now, we'd say, the busiest visitor town to the Bellarine. I'm calling it visitors, not ones that go permanently to the caravan parks as they do in Ocean Grove. This is individual visitors that come to have a look at Barwon Heads, and it's a really busy little hub. And we have the caravan there until the end of January every day, 10 till 4, and then every weekend until Easter. As well as our centres, we also have the Queenscliff Visitor Information Centre that comes under the umbrella of Tourism Geelong and The Bellarine, but is managed by the borough itself, not by what was my management.
Okay. As I've gotten to know, love and appreciate what you've done, what really struck me was the way you've managed volunteers. So this is managing, because from 33, from when you started to now, it was 125 volunteers at different locations. What has been, because I know, just managing paid staff in remote and different locations can be a challenge. And I remember you sharing with me some insights around what you've done to inspire them and also retain them, because your retention rate of volunteers is outstanding. So if you could just share with us what you've learnt by way of what's worked and what hasn't in volunteer management over the years.
Oh, thanks, Despina. Yes, we now have 125 volunteers, and that's probably as large a number as we need. Across those centres, every day we have 20 volunteers working a day. Each of those centres and booths have no paid staff working alongside them, like most other visitor centres. So there's myself who manages the centres, and I have one coordinator who works with me. And at the present time, that's Josh. And Josh has been with me now for about 18 months. The position that Josh has is advertised as a step in the door in the tourism industry to get young people who have a tourism degree started in the industry. And I know out there's lots of people with degrees, and just to get a foot in the door is a big thing for them. Over the 24 years I've been in the role, I've had 11 of those young people come and start with me, and the majority stay for 12 months, some longer, and the majority have gone on to bigger and better things within the tourism industry, of which I am very proud of. Both myself and my assistant, we look after the volunteers. Volunteers work for free, but not for nothing. We treat every volunteer, we would hope, the same. Don't give preference to any volunteer over another. We don't give volunteers awards, individual awards. We're a team. If we are up for any awards, mainly the Victorian Tourism Award, we put that award in as a team effort, never as an individual effort. And funnily enough, the City of Greater Geelong every year ask us, could you nominate your best volunteer? We're giving out volunteer awards across the council, as do other organisations. And I think that's a real no-no to choose one volunteer over another. Like paid staff, not everyone is what you would employ to be your best staff person. And sometimes you think, how did I put that person on, whether it's paid or a volunteer? But volunteers are there for a reason. The majority of our volunteers, and I'd say 85% of our volunteers, volunteer with us to put something back into a beautiful region of which they've worked, lived and love, and they're giving back a little bit of that something to visitors who come into the centres. They're there for different reasons, but the majority do it as a social outing and to keep their mind active. Teachers would be of the highest percentage, retired teachers, of our volunteers. So we have retired teachers, nurses, etc., and a lot of people from really good backgrounds now come to join our team. However, we have had people come in that have had perhaps chronic fatigue, suffered from depression, things like that their doctors have advised them to get out and try and do something with people to get them up and active again. And I do take that into consideration when a person tells me that at an interview, and some do. And one lady in particular started with me about 10 years ago, and she told me she had chronic fatigue, and I worked with her, and she's a fantastic volunteer now, one of our ambassadors. And while she still is in a group recommending people and helping people with that condition, I'm sure she's overcome it. And she's told me over and over, or thanked me for giving her that opportunity to get her life back on track. So that's just one volunteer. Majority are there for fun. I love them to have fun, because if they're smiling and having fun when a visitor comes in, that rubs off on the visitor. It's contagious.
And rewarding them is important too, because I know you organise a great big meal.
We do.
Once a year, and recently you also do facilitate and have done professional development conferences for the volunteers, which I had the absolute pleasure of attending one this year. It was and it was outstanding to see so many volunteers come and learn, and still so green and growing with enthusiasm for what they do. And I think it's a credit to your enthusiasm for what you've been doing. And speaking of maintaining standards, congratulations to Tourism Awards. You also won an award for your visitor centres for the region. In terms of standard, if you could tell us a little bit about, for anyone that is not familiar with accreditation and visitor information centres, certainly before I became involved in a recent contract role last year, I was certainly naive to the benefits and what it actually stood for. If you could just take us through the accreditation journey and how that has contributed to the success of the brand as an information centre.
Well, hopefully the visitors recognise the brand, the blue and gold italic eye. I would love to see that advertised, particularly through the media, on television, particularly on holiday shows, and I've really pushed that at lots of meetings I've been to, and hopefully down the track that will happen more. With the changes that have just been made to accreditation, they're a lot more lenient, perhaps with some of the requirements that needed to be met. By having our centres accredited, they're recognised with a standard that, firstly, the opening hours, that there is someone there to meet and greet a visitor. The hours have just been changed to 10 to 4 from 9 to 5, but that is flexible, either side of those hours, but the core hours are now 10 to 4. A visitor recognises by the sign, I would hope, that there's a person in that centre that knows what they're talking about, that can give information on the local area. All of our volunteers are trained never to say no, never to say they don't know. They have to find out. So whether the question is directly related to tourism or something that relates to the region or something that a visitor just can't find out themselves, we find out for them. Many of those people who phone up could have just Googled, but they don't think to do it. So I think our volunteers like the challenge of finding something out. They're aware of accreditation. We train them by providing a weekly newsletter that is emailed, and only 7 of our 125 volunteers do not have email. As well as emailing the newsletter, a hard copy of that is provided in every centre every Monday, and that tells them what's happening for the week. They're familiar with all the safety issues that come through, and being accredited, of course, we have first-hand knowledge of road closures from Vic roads, CFA, if there's a fire, we contact them immediately, all of those sort of things, because I guess being accredited, you're on the list of centres that are acknowledged across the state, so we're kept up to date with all of that. I think the training is the main thing. Whether you have paid staff or volunteers, to keep them trained is definitely one of the main requirements, I think, for accreditation. And as you said, Despina, you were a presenter at our conference. Every second year we have a volunteer conference, which, as you can imagine, is quite expensive to facilitate. We always have it in one of our major hotels, and we hold that conference as any other conference would be held in Geelong. Makes the volunteers feel important. They come in for the day, they're given morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, and we try to set the program that is aimed directly at what they would do in everyday life in a centre. Sometimes we're suggested, why don't you have this person and why don't you have that person? It's about what they do from day to day in the centres. As well as the conference, we also have, you did mention familiarisation tours, and we have a familiarisation tour every 6 weeks. And we take the volunteers out to our operators. We are a membership-based organisation. We have over 650 financial members. So the highlight of the 6 weeks is trying to fit as many of those operators in a day that we can still have the concentration of the volunteers as you go from place to place. So we hire a coach. We get up to 70 volunteers on every Famil tour, which shows that they're committed and they want to learn more. It's a great day sociably, but to have first-hand knowledge of what's being offered in the region is the most important thing. As well as that, with accreditation, there's little things that they like you to with, and that is that our volunteers are all provided with a uniform, and they're really proud of their uniform. We replace the uniform every 12 months. So every 12 months they're provided with a new one. We want our volunteers to look fresh, clean, bright and friendly when people come into the centres. So there's a standard, and with their uniform, which is bright blue now, the colour of accreditation, they wear black trousers or skirts, and they are also provided with a cap and a winter jacket to wear if it's cooler in the winter. And they certainly wear them. They're really proud of that. They wear it to conferences, any training sessions, and on all the Famils. They're representing our team, and that's what it's all about.
Fabulous. Now, there's been a lot of discussion around the table, particularly every time a visitor information centre summit comes up or a new executives come on board questioning the value of a visitor information centre, and some regions have even taken the step to close down their visitor information centre in their region. What would, in terms of the value and the benefit coming from someone that's worked firsthand day in, day out, what would your advice or contribution be to that discussion for anyone that's sitting around the table saying, well, why have a visitor information centre when everything's going digital these days and people are going to Google and the apps and so forth? What would your
Well, there's been many changes over the years, and in the last 3 to 5 years in particular, our numbers to the centres have definitely dropped. People are using electronic media now, and up until then, we did many, many inquiries for accommodation. Most of our inquiries were on accommodation. Now the accommodation inquiries come in last, and they're people who can't find accommodation anywhere else on any of the websites. And if they ring our centres, chances are we can definitely help them with last-minute accommodation. People come into the centres now to speak to a local. What can you tell me about your town? Just taking the volunteers on the famille tours, I show them things that they don't even know exists around their back door, to be honest.
And they live here.
Yeah. And they find, oh my gosh, I didn't know that was there. This is beautiful. This is amazing. And the volunteers are great ambassadors, because when they see these things, they take their friends and show their friends and their family, and they're telling those visitors about it. We've got some beautiful spots. We've got some beautiful, amazing operators now to look after. And if they've seen what they have to offer, it's so important they can pass it on to visitors. For people that are saying there's no need for visitor centres now, I find that very disappointing, because I now know myself, to be honest, years ago I never used information centres. I never went to an information centre for accommodation. But I've travelled overseas now. I've been in Italy. I've stopped in a little information centre and I have found out something about go around there, that's where the locals go. And that's what you want to see, where the locals go. It's amazing what the locals can tell you. And we do surveys through the centres. We hand a survey form to visitors with a returned postage paid envelope and say to them, if you have time when you've finished your holiday, just fill out the form. And those forms come back in every day. We have an amazing response, really, because people don't have to do it. And the comments that people make about so-and-so suggested I went here, and had I not stopped at your centre, I would not have known to go there, and it made my holiday. And we've got many, many comments on that.
Love that. And you've showed me these feedback forms that are sent from they've gone home overseas and they've mailed it back, and it really leaves that lasting impressions, because people remember people, right?
That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
And I love that. So important in terms of what makes a visitor experience unique is seeing those things that you don't expect, the surprises.
Exactly.
And that's what you get from a visitor information centre. Now, back when you started, Elizabeth, was tourism or visitor servicing, I'm sure the visitor economy, that even that language didn't exist. What was it that motivated you is this what you wanted to do always? Or is this something like, how did you stumble across the industry?
Well, I love the Geelong and Bellarine. I love the Bellarine Peninsula. I live on the Bellarine Peninsula and I love it. And I was working with the council at the time, with the Shire of Corowa, and I saw the advertisement advertised and I thought I could be good at that job. I had experience supervising staff and I thought I'm sure I can put it together. I volunteered, as I said, before I took on this job. And when I was volunteering, I was listening to other volunteers that I was on with, and they would say, oh, you turn up here and you don't even get a coffee. They don't give you any guidance. You don't know what you're doing. And I was listening to all that and I thought I could turn this around. And I now run a pretty tight ship, I think. For other regions, as I said, there's myself and one paid staff person. We assist over 200,000 visitors verbally, face-to-face a year, and that's all done with an amazing team of volunteers. They're well trained. No volunteer works alone. They're all there to help one another, and they come from a fair region around Geelong, and I guess we have a fair region to choose volunteers from. We never advertise. It's all word of mouth, and they're passionate about what they're telling people about our region. And I think maybe that's all derived from my early beginnings of seeing what to do and what not to do with a volunteer team.
Oh, Elizabeth, so much I love about what you've said. So many young aspiring tourism professionals, they're either in study, like you said, or they've finished study, or they've travelled from overseas or interstate and looking to get into the industry or have a career change, and are always asking me, oh, can you connect me with someone? Can you put my name forward? If there's any jobs around? And what I love, and I always say, go and volunteer somewhere. Go and just pick up the phone. People will always love what you have in their organisation. And I love that that's what you did. And even as businesses, we don't take the time to go step into, it's one thing step into your customer's shoes, but step into that you stepped into your role.
That's right.
Before you and what a great insight to have And the result is then what you were able to do just from even having the awareness to say, oh, here they are complaining. There's no tea and coffee. They're not valued. They're feeling they're not valued,
right.
and making that happen. So managing the challenging times when the challenging staff member or challenging situations, or yes, we are also working in an environmental space that, you know, the mother gods you mentioned, we just had recent flood warnings and fires. Can a time come to mind that it was real challenging for you and what you took away from it? So something that, you know, could take us to a moment that you consider possibly one of the worst moments that you were able to turn around or learn something from in your time.
We haven't had absolute disasters, but a couple of years ago there was at the centre at Little River on the Princess Highway, there was a petrol leak at the service station and there was a complete shutdown. One of our volunteers was affected by the fumes from the petrol and was taken to hospital by ambulance. That was just something that a time came when you have to act quickly and not panic. There were volunteers out there that we got back into town as quickly as we could. Everything went very smoothly and there were no issues or problems to follow up on. One was taken to hospital by ambulance, as I said, and we went to the hospital straight to make sure he was okay. I think the main thing is look after your volunteers, no matter what the situation may be. Up until about 7 years ago, we retired our volunteers at 75. That was really easy for me because they all knew when they started at 75 they left. We had a few issues with that. Some went to the mayor of the council to complain they had to leave and they didn't want to. But that was our policy and it was all in writing on the PD when they started. However, that has all changed now. There's no requirement to age to retire whether you're a volunteer or whether you work. The insurance covers have changed and you can now volunteer and be covered until you're 90 years of age. However, we have had a couple of volunteers that have had early signs of dementia set in. And I guess when they were retiring at 75, I never thought of anything like that. That's not something easy to have to go through with a volunteer when you think, oh, that volunteer is getting vague, becoming vague, and maybe giving people incorrect information. So that was a bit of a challenge for me a couple of years ago when I had a volunteer in that situation. And she was an absolutely amazing volunteer that would fill in at very short notice when I needed someone. She'd fill in every day. She had not a lot to do. And then all of a sudden that was gone because of her mental illness or dementia. And we went through that. When that sort of thing happens, you have to get other volunteers involved as well because they're working alongside those people. So you've got to be very professional and treat everyone the same and don't talk about those people to other people. Never talk about anyone behind their back. It's always up front, and what you say to one volunteer, you say to another, and if you can't say it, don't say it.
So very true. And that's I guess you always come across those difficult conversations that you have to have. That's a really good approach to that because that's, yes, the hard conversations that we all have to have always throughout our personal and our professional lives. So we'll do as we wrap things up. I know you have to keep moving. I've got an excellence round for you that I always love to ask my guests. In the beginning, what do you find was holding you back? Even if you had to have, that first difficult conversation, what did you find was holding you back to get to that next level of your career?
Probably family.
Family, yeah.
So my children were young when I started work, and at the time I had 4 children and they were 5 years apart, so they were all very close. And when I took on this role, my youngest child was in grade 6. So I went back to full-time work. So I've worked for 24 years full-time. I couldn't have done that when my children were all young. So I worked part-time then. But I really put in this job. I just absolutely love the job. I've been passionate about it. I've put in many hours beyond the call of duty, and I'm now about to retire. So I'm finishing up next week. And I say to everyone, I wasn't a person who waited till I was 65 and then left that day because I couldn't wait to leave. I love my job. I love the region. I love promoting tourism. I have loved working with volunteers, and a lot of people said, how have you done it? But we've got a great team, a wonderful team. We have a wonderful work team as well. And I'm leaving on a high thinking I'm privileged to have had the job I've had and going out and still loving it.
Oh, and the mark you're going to leave on this, in this industry and in this world, Elizabeth, you've really, like I said, it's been an absolute honour to know you, but also your legacy and your passion for what you do and the greater good of volunteerism. I think there's particularly here in Victoria, you can't kind of say Visitor Information Centre without your name.
Oh, really?
Being next to it. So it's all a kudos to you and congratulations for such a fabulous and successful career. And I don't quite think you're done yet.
We'll see.
We'll see. Watch this space. The best advice that you've ever received from someone, a mentor from the early days or up until now, going through the next phase of your career, is there anything come to mind?
The only thing I can say is never send an email to anyone that you don't want to go around the world.
Yeah. That's great advice. Don't send an email to anyone that you wouldn't like to go viral.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
exactly.
Think twice, take a deep breath, go for a walk.
Correct.
Sleep on it. That's excellent advice. Do you love to read? Is there a book that you could recommend? Is there?
No, actually,
yeah.
I haven't had time to read. So when I retire, I'm going to learn how to read.
Well, you'll have to check in with me personally if you've any golden books out there that you've read in this glorious time that you'll have. So any parting piece of guidance to other tourism experience makers, volunteers, and thriving, inspired professionals, what would be any parting piece of advice that you'd like to give them?
I think if everyone loves what they do, to love what you do, to love who you work with, and to love the region in which you're promoting, what a happy life.
Oh, happy life. That is a lovely way to finish up. Now, are we going to see at Elizabeth Curtin, Twitter, Instagram, .com? How can we stay connected to see your journey forward? Watch this space?
Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. I'm just finishing next Friday and that's it for the moment.
How exciting for you. Thank you for all the wonderful thing you've done. Thank you for agreeing to do this. I know you're a little bit apprehensive at the start, but you're such a natural. That was, I really greatly appreciate it. And I look forward to staying in touch with you. Onwards and upwards, Mrs. Curtin.
Thank you, Despina. As the little note on my desk says only one regret in life. I should have drank more champagne. So perhaps I'll do that now.
There's your quotable. Yes. Thank you so much. Relax.